Please remember that any individual referenced in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law, and any opinions or views expressed in the podcast are solely those of participants. Some of the content discussed in the podcast may contain violence or graphic descriptions and may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. On December 5th, 1978, winter settled over Mississippi's Gulf Coast. The day had peaked at 59 degrees, but by nightfall, the air had dropped to a sharp 36. The roads lay still and silent. And along Ladnier Road, one of the few lights breaking the darkness came from a small brick convenience store, its wide glass windows glowing like a beacon in the night. Inside, 20-year-old Debra Gunter worked the graveyard shift at the little general store. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The cooler droned in the back. It was the lonely soundtrack of another midnight shift. Debra believed it was her chance to build something better for herself and for her husband. But Debra was young, determined, still searching for her own peace and happiness. And then, sometime in the dark hours before dawn, she was gone. The little general store once promised shoppers that it only takes a minute. For Debra, those words became something else entirely, because a minute was all it took for everything to change. 4 days later, her body was discovered in the woods of McIntosh, Alabama, 85 miles from the store. It was a brutal murder that has haunted 2 states for more than 4 decades. The truth has never come out of the shadows. This is the story of Debra Gunter and the search for answers that has never stopped. Hey guys, and welcome back. This week we're doing something a little different. You'll hear our full conversation right here on the podcast, as usual. But if you want to watch the interview, we've also posted the video version on our YouTube channel. We sat down with Lieutenant Darren Versiga for a video chat, and we're excited to share it with you in both formats. So in our last episode, we left Debra Gunter's case hanging on a string of questions about what really happened to her, about whether her murder was connected to a wave of robberies and abductions across the Gulf Coast, and about what investigators did, or didn't, uncover nearly 50 years ago. To start answering those questions, we turned to someone who knows investigations from the inside out. Lieutenant Darren Versiga has been in law enforcement since 1986, beginning as a loss prevention officer at TGNY before working as a correctional officer and later a patrol officer with the Pascagoula Police. Over the years, he's served as a city detective, narcotics investigator, and DA's office investigator. He even founded his own firm, Covert Investigations and Consulting Services, before returning to Pascagoula PD, where he now serves as shift lieutenant. He has spent decades untangling complex cases, and he's one of the few people still asking hard questions about what happened to Debra Gunter. And he is so knowledgeable about so many things.
He is. It's been such a great experience getting to know him.
Yes. And he's always willing to offer up suggestions too. Like if there's another case that, we're kind of stumped on, we can always say, what would you think if this were your case? And just give him a hypothetical, and he'd say, oh, I would look at such as, and most of the time he'll give you a list of suspects. Actually, he's like, that sounds like so-and-so.
Yeah.
And so it's nice having that actually.
And, he's one of the rare investigators, I think, that would actually go out and found his own agency on top of doing what he does. Yeah. But, on top of it all, he just loves doing what he does. It's like his niche, it's just what he likes to do. He doesn't feel the burnout like some people would. And it's totally understandable that people do feel that, but it's just that's not his bag. He just loves to do this and to help people and to get the puzzle solved, which I can relate to. I love puzzles. So
we have a puzzle still sitting on the table in here.
We do too.
Sorta I think I was actually working on it, like, we had it out working on it when we originally started this interview, and then
See, I'm so
it's still
bad
sitting
about
there.
puzzles that we actually finished the one we were working on when we recorded the first one, and now we are on another one.
Well, yeah, ours is still
Well, you
sitting
know
there.
my puzzle hobby, right? Or you
Eh
remember me telling you all about, like, in 2000 when the whole COVID thing hit, we just
yeah.
started doing puzzles all the time, and we probably done, I don't even know, like, probably 150 of them, probably. Anyway.
Yeah. So, it's still hanging on there. Gonna have
Mm,
to work on that because, otherwise, like, can't use the kitchen table.
oh, yeah.
It's still
I
sitting on there.
Unfortunately, like, it's just Jeff and I now, so, like, we don't really use the table a lot for the table unless we
And
have
we don't
company,
actually
so
really we don't really use it either. Like, we all sit wherever,
it's a
in the living room,
workplace or
whatever.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
yeah,
I mean, most of the time it's on the go anyway.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, but
True, true.
go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, I'm a 33-year veteran. My name is Darren Versiga. I'm a lieutenant with the Pascagoula Police Department, and currently I do all the cold cases for the city of Pascagoula. You wouldn't think we would have a lot, but we actually had 26 when I started this. We have more now. And for a small town, that to me seemed to be astronomical. But so I just got into working these cases, had a passion for it, and really love the research and the analytical part of it, trying to pull things together. And so here's where we're at today is with some of these cold cases.
I think that's what kinda drew me to cold cases too, is the, like, going back and trying to put all those puzzle pieces together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because there sometimes, especially when you're looking at a case that is as old as Deborah's, that information is not readily available on the internet. I mean, there's a lot out there on the internet, but the news wasn't published, you know, within 5 seconds. So you have to, like, really dig and pull and get kind of creative in a way to hit on things that would be relevant.
That things that I really started was, that Deborah wasn't on the internet at all when I first started
Mhm.
this. And of course I started in 2010 with the city of Pascagoula again. I had left, went to the DA's office, and started my own business, a private investigation business. And then when I came back, I realized that none of our Jackson County cold cases, Pascagoula cold cases were online. And so I started doing that and also found that we had skeletal remains that weren't in any database. And so that kind of just blossomed in all this other kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
Deborah's appeared to me to be connected to maybe another case that I'd been working also. So that's why I really started digging in on this one, putting it out there. And hopefully, time is short now. We don't know how many people still alive during, when she was kidnapped from the store and murdered. And so
Right.
crucial for me to get it out as soon as I could, hoping that maybe somebody on their deathbed would give a confession. You never know unless you do it.
And sometimes that happens.
Yeah, sometimes it
I
does.
mean, you
You're
hear
either
about
part of the
that.
problem or the solution. So that was a solution for me is to get it out in the public.
And I think sometimes whenever cases are dormant for a while, people tend to think that they've been forgotten about. And so you don't know if there's an opportunity for some kind of like deathbed confession because they, in their mind, this has been put to rest.
That's right.
Nobody's looking at this anymore. Everything's good. But when you start bringing it up and putting it out there, now all of a sudden, this guilt comes in or this pressure comes in like, oh my gosh, it hasn't been forgotten. And that I think that does tend to, weigh a little bit heavier. So I think it's great to keep it out there because you don't know who's still around
Mhm.
that has
You don't
information.
know who's waiting for that sign from God.
Right.
Something about that. And some people go, the minute you started, I can't tell you about when I posted the Janie Sanders case, people started calling me about other cold cases that I didn't even know anything about. And so they're
Mhm.
educating me, I'm educating them. And then I'm looking at different suspects now and a pool of all kinds of suspects we didn't have in the 70s. And so to me, it was a win-win, 100% to put it out there. It had been collecting dust in a box on a shelf, doing nothing. And
Mhm.
so it was, why not put it out there? What could happen? It could get solved, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I put it
Yeah,
out there. Hope for the best.
yeah. I love the way you were talking about, how people were calling about all kinds of things when that one came out, because that happens all the time when we're sharing cases on our website or on Facebook or wherever.
Yeah.
We start like getting out of the woodworks and it's like, oh, it's in reply to this case, but it has nothing to do with that case. It's about something completely different.
Yeah. And
why
the
we,
worst thing that happens.
yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I said, why we in law enforcement ain't caught on to that yet, I don't know. But we should be putting them out there every year, anniversary day, or the death date, or the birth date of the victim. We should be putting them out there and really tugging on the emotional strings of the public. People's emotions change over years, so they may be hardened, and now they're getting close to what they consider death, and they may want to do that confession. They may want to confess to their priest or their best friend, or get it off their chest. It's been their burden for so long. Again, you're either part of the problem, part of the solution. I just choose to be a solution.
And it's a low cost thing, right? Like it costs time to get it put back out there.
It costs nothing to put it online. I'm just telling you.
Right. Yeah. It's just, it takes a little bit of time, and you don't know who you're going to reach. And what the worst thing that comes out of it is you're still in the exact same spot.
Right. That's the worst.
Yeah. So when you first came across Debra's case, what stood out to you about it?
The amount of stab wounds, which has been made public since day one, which, as you know, and I know, that I could not believe that was already out in the open day one.
Right.
Yeah, we talked a lot about that in the last episode.
Right. And you never want to give up how many times someone's been stabbed, or really their manner of death, how they were killed. You really want to keep that to your heart, because then when you do get a confession, or you do get somebody that calls in, you can weed them out like that. Now we have a case where where the people believe, still to this day, that some people were killed in a restaurant and chopped up, put in the freezer. And I can tell you absolutely that is not the case, but they call us all the time, and they're giving me information that they got from the jailhouse. They said, yeah, well, they were cut up and put in the freezer. And I check that one off. It's just not true. So, so when you know the good information, of course, you don't put that out there. And how many times she was stabbed was should have never been put out, but it was out, is what it is, and we can't take it back now. The only thing we can do is try to work with what we have.
And that was one of the things that we talked about. So at the time that we're recording this, it's been released as kind of it's been early released for our subscribers, but it'll be public next week, which will be November.
The week before we release this one on Patreon.
Yeah. I don't even know what the date will be.
It's the week before or the week after.
November 6th. So in that episode, we talk about the fact that they were so detailed in the information that they gave out, like down to like even what kind of knife they thought was used. And it was just mind blowing to us, because it was like, how do you, now that you've put all of this out there, how do you corroborate what you're getting? How do you know that the people that are calling in information haven't read this in the newspaper?
I know. I mean, like even even if you said that she was stabbed, don't tell them with what.
Right.
And
we kind of made like a tongue-in-cheek comment that was like, well, we better get rid of that pocket knife, like.
Do you know why that happened in the day? Do y'all have a clue why those type things happened with these old cases like that?
We were wondering.
Yeah.
Because it's not something you see.
Here's what happens. So when a new sheriff comes in, the new sheriff hires his buddies who have never been trained. This was the old days, before there was civil service, where you couldn't just get rid of deputies. You could come in and basically clean clock, hire your brothers, your family, your cousins, your best friends, their children. You can hire them, and so they're coming on board, and they have not been educated on what you do or what you do not do, and they love to talk. And the problem with that is we have learned over the years those mistakes have haunted us in some of these old cases. You're
Mhm.
not going to find a lot of that now. Every now and then you'll find a sheriff that is uneducated, got his way up to being sheriff, however he got sheriff, knew everybody in town, and
Mhm.
he will let out the information that you shouldn't let out. But
Right.
those days, I hope, are behind us. But that is why the majority of it is because you had people that had never been in law enforcement or had only been reserves or had just
Mhm.
started their law enforcement career and had absolutely no crime scene training whatsoever about what to do and what not to put out there.
Mhm.
Wow, that's a
And that
little
was
wild,
the problem.
wild west.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It that was I mean, we had a good idea of what they had, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, I guess talking about that leads kinda to the next question was what was your reaction when you started looking at the file?
So looking at that, I thought, okay, well, that's already out there. And I was comparing this case to my Janie Sanders case, which was a stabbing victim as well. She had been stabbed numerous times, and that too had been put out in the public on how many times she was stabbed. And 6 months, or yeah, about 5 months prior to that, we had a teacher stabbed, and they had put out how many times she had been stabbed, and we're correlating it to, some kind of devil worshiping because as many numbers was stabbed here and she was stabbed there, but um, that's just how it was done then. I thought, golly, man, that had to be something back then. And why would we put all that out? But it is just being untrained, uneducated enough for them. But when I saw how many times she had been stabbed, I had already seen that, and I'd already seen my victims that I was looking at, and I said, these are Jackson County women that are being stabbed multiple
Mhm.
times by strangers. Normally, that's somebody you know. That's how the old
Right.
cliche and all the Columbo type investigations go, is that, if you're stabbed multiple times, it's personal. That's not
Mhm.
it's not 100% true. That's a gauge to look at, but it's not one you just hang your hat on,
Yeah.
because I know many killers have stabbed multiple times and they didn't even know the victims at all. They just like
Yeah.
stabbing.
Right. Right.
Or sometimes it's because they're inexperienced, right? They don't know what they're doing, and they don't really do the job right from the get-go, I guess, is the most tactful way to say that. So
Well,
they
I
have
Yeah.
to
think a
do it
lot of
more
it
than one
is.
time.
I think a lot of it is they think you stab somebody one time and you die. It's kind of like the old TV show, so somebody getting shot and blowing backwards, and that doesn't happen. And so they're
Yeah.
stabbing them, they're still moving. They're going, "Oh my God, I got to stab them more." And then so that's what they
Mhm.
do. They're still moving. They don't die right away like you would think.
Yeah. And how often do you encounter, just curious, a victim who's not just been stabbed, but has been strangled or been bludgeoned and strangled, or, all the things all at once? Does that happen very often where there's more than one method of trying to,
There's
take the
not a lot. The ligature strangling that happened to Deborah and as others, and the stabbing, usually it's one or the other. It's almost like,
Mhm.
I don't know why they would give up on the strangulation part. I don't know why they would do that. Maybe because they passed out and then they were coming to and they said, okay, I ain't got time to sit around here and strangle her again. And she may
Yeah,
come back again. And then they just stab
that's
her.
what
That's
I kinda
probably
wondered.
what happened in some of these cases. But usually it's just a shooting or a stabbing and it's done with.
Do you think that that adds some support to it would have been somebody that knew her, the fact that there was these different types of assault, or do you think it would more likely support, that it still leaves it open to it could have been anybody?
I think it still leaves it open because it's hard to tell. I mean, we see, all the multiple stabbings that I'm aware of that we have solved. They were strangers. They weren't somebody known. The ones that I've been dealing with, these cold cases. Um, but that's not to say that doesn't happen, because it does. Homosexual crimes will have multiple stab wounds in multiple places. You can almost see it. If it's in the genital areas, that's a big clue for us as investigators why they're stabbing in the genital areas. You're never going to cheat on me again. I'll show you, kind of a thing. And they're very violent. Homosexual murders are very violent. And not all of them, but the majority of them we look at, there's a key there for that. And so when you see multiple stabbings or overkill, you have to wonder, okay, this is personal, but it ain't really always. So, it's a gauge. You flip a coin, you look at it, you eliminate all the family, you eliminate everybody you can. And then once they're all eliminated and nobody really sticks out, you have to go for the strange abduction and then say this is just one of them that we need to look at a little harder.
So I was going through my questions here, and I guess that kind of actually, there's not a lot. So, as many details as were put out there in those early days, one of the things that they don't do is they go back and forth with, whether or not they think it was more than one person. They give a description, a physical description. And I think in one of the very early articles, they released a description of one person they thought was involved. And in the way it was worded, I think we talked about it in the first episode. We were like, in this early article, there's some indication here that they thought that there was more than one person involved. And then you get to the later articles, and it's like they think there were at least two people. And then they at first declined to give a description, and then a description comes out, and it's one guy has blonde hair, one has brown hair, one, shoulder length, all of these things. Was there anybody when you're looking through the file that stood out to you as matching these descriptions? Like, did it allow you to kind of get an idea when you're talking about ruling out family members and stuff, like, did anybody match this? Did it allow you to say, okay, well, it definitely couldn't have been that? Or can you just kind of not trust that description in general?
You have to look at all of it. I mean, you do. And yes, I had some suspects, and I will tell you, I would put them up there and I would work that to pieces trying to put
Mhm.
them in the puzzle. So
Mm.
much so that I was almost 100% of the suspect. He was a known killer. He's already been to prison for murdering somebody after this one in 1982. And so I looked at him as being a real possibility. And then when I really look at it again, he was actually in jail in a work release program. He could have left, but it's just not feasible for him to had been my suspect in this one. He was connected by name in the Janie Sanders case. He had killed another lady, was connected to another. And so I've got three bodies that he's connected to, and this would be a fourth. So it made it look like when you're looking at him, how many bodies can you be connected to? How many murders can you be connected?
Yeah.
Either by virtue of how it was done or the location or what. And just I interviewed him and really worked him over on some of the other cases that I knew he was part of. Um, but when I really got down to it and finally found the person I needed to talk to was the administrator of the what we call the camp here in Jackson County, and it was the very first restitution center before it was called the restitution center, and he was a part of that. And so I was able to eliminate him based on that for that case. I'd even found relatives up just above McIntosh that I can't remember the name of the town now, but it was above McIntosh that I said, damn, he's even got relatives there. So what is the likelihood of this being him? And I just
I think
could not.
Wagerville is the next kind of little area,
If you
Wagerville.
said it, I would be able to tell you, but it
There's
was north of
Sunflower, Wagerville, Leroy,
what,
Jackson.
Leroy? Did you say
Yeah,
Leroy?
Leroy. Yeah.
Okay, Leroy may have been the town or
If you're
the
headed
area.
north and you go through McIntosh, you'll come through a little community called Sunflower, then you'll hit Wagerville, then, um, Leroy is the next kind of bigger area that you'll come through, and then you'll run into Jackson.
No, it's going to be in between Jackson and McIntosh. It's going to be in a little community there that I was able to track relatives to. Leroy sounds right.
St. Stevens? That's
No,
another one, but it's kinda off 43. Leroy is the next one you would hit, I think, from
how far is
McIntosh as
Leroy?
far um, oh gosh.
If it's
Twen
in 20 or 30 miles, that's going to be it.
Yeah, yeah, it's not gonna be far.
That's Leroy. then it's going to be
Yeah.
Leroy. It started with an L.
Yeah.
So he had relatives there. And I thought, well, okay, well, everything kind of
That's
points that way,
yeah.
but he was in jail.
Because you think that, I mean, McIntosh is 85 miles away from where she was last
Yeah.
seen. And
Right.
so it's not a huge area. And then where her body was left was by this abandoned in the woods by this abandoned drive-in theater. And so you almost think like whoever would have done that had to be familiar enough with the area to know that was a place to go.
Absolutely. That's
And
my total belief.
Kind of as an aside before you go on too, was the being on work release, but being in prison, was that really the only thing that kind of ruled him out?
Yeah, it was. It would have been next to impossible for him to have been out at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning and take her
Uh,
and be gone
Okay.
that period of time, in
'Cause it's
reference
kind
to
of
be.
interesting. I was I have a case. There's a case out here, I don't know if you know who Warren Forrest is. He's a
I don't.
serial killer out here in the Pacific Northwest, and, I've been following it for a while. They just put out a podcast called Stolen Voices, but, he was actually in a work release well, he was in a work release program. I don't know even why he was, but there was a lot of circumstances that led to him having all kinds of freedom that he shouldn't have had, down to even having a vehicle access. And so he actually was in prison and should not have been that should have been his alibi, but it wasn't. They think he murdered somebody during that time.
So since you said that, one of the suspects in this case, Joseph Lorette. I don't know if you've ever heard that name. Uh, Joseph
Mm,
Anthony Lorette. Okay.
Kinda
He
sounds
is one of the
familiar,
serial
but
killers. I'm sorry.
he kinda sounded familiar, but I'm not placing him.
So he was executed in Missouri around 1982, maybe, but he killed one in Biloxi in 1976, and he also was in our town in 1972. So he traveled from Florida all the way through. He was considered schizophrenic, and he had been diagnosed as being schizophrenic. He was in the Department of Corrections in Missouri, and they would do what they call an inmate evaluation. He then would go from the prison, he would actually go into the mental health division of it where he could get leave. And so this guy was raping women. And then when he would get leave, they would say, now you better come back in 5 days or, you're going to be reclassified. Well, he wouldn't show up. And then they would have to find him. And normally he would be found arrested somewhere else. And once he was arrested, he would be back in the criminal system and that revolving door would go all over again. Well, then he was reevaluated into the mental health system where he got
Mhm.
leave. And this happened over and over and over again.
Yeah, and this
He killed,
gentleman here was also, like, in and out of the hospital. Now that I say that, I don't think it was prison release, I think it was in the hospital here.
well, that's what he would do. That was his game through the prison system, and he ended up killing multiple people. They finally caught him. I think it was 1980 when they finally caught him, and he may have been executed in 85. It seems like that's right, but he confessed to stabbing in Biloxi, stabbing murder in Biloxi in 1976, and several other crimes across the nation. He was a traveler just like Sam Little was, went from point A to point
Yeah,
B,
yeah,
stole things, gained his way into houses, and raped and killed many. He didn't kill them all. Some he would rape and
yeah,
let live. Other ones he would kill. And um, so I have to look at that prison stuff and whether or not they get leave and if they're on work furlough. There was all kinds of incentives trying to, I guess, help out the inmate a little bit. Kind of
mhm, yeah,
rehabilitate him, let him get back in the workforce. And of course, when they're being looked at, they're going to be on their best behavior until they're out of there. And then they're not going to be on their best behavior. And
yeah,
it took us a while to catch on to that over this, but eventually we did with Joseph Lorette, and we finally put
yeah.
him to death.
do you think that there were leads that they should have pursued that they didn't? You're talking about these different suspects that you looked at. Um, do you think that there were missed opportunities, or do you think, they did a pretty thorough job in the beginning? Because I can't help but think that we know there are serial killers that are happening during this time period. But this seems like something, when I think about Washington County, this is not something that typically occurs there. And I think, gosh, how well trained were they to handle this?
I don't think would at all. Not in that day and
Well,
age. We just did not.
yeah, I was gonna
It,
say
We
serial
thought we were.
killers were barely a thing by that time, and that they just
like,
started coming to knowledge.
And they were only white. Nobody thought there was ever black serial killers, and they were out there just like the
Mhm.
whites were.
right.
We concentrated more on the whites, and that's how we learn through law enforcement. I go to ROCIC conferences now, and I'm not even in investigations anymore, but I go to the homicide conference every year. I learn something new every year. I bring back to our department, and that's just part of it. But I'm interested in this kind of work. If you're a burglary detective, you may not be interested in homicides, and you're only interested in the burglaries. And I will tell you, there are guys that do traffic, love traffic. They don't like regular patrol, but they love traffic, and that's just the nature of the beast. You have to if I was a chief of police anywhere, I would interview each one of my employees and figure out who needs to be where and put them in that position. But when you got a small department and a small budget, you're working a felony shoplifting one day and a rape the next day and a homicide the day after
Right.
that. You just work them all, and there's just no way to get around that.
Yeah. And I'm sure there weren't as many like training things available either back then. You
And
know,
then that's
it's kind of you're learning. This is hands-on experience. Like you get this
Yeah.
knowledge as it happens. Like you learn from all that.
now in reference to Jackie Walker that was on this case. Let me tell you what, he was a different guy when it came to these. He documented everything, even though that some of the stuff got out, and he might not have been as well trained as some of them. He was above board in that. I've had many conversations with him, re-interviewed him on this case. We had meeting after meeting, but the best thing that I had with him is he kept every one of his records, and that's how
And
I
he's
even
the
got the records. Is he had them? He had a complete file.
and he's the deputy from Jackson County,
He is
right?
one of the deputies from Jackson County, Jackie
Okay.
Walker.
God, he kept that file for that long? Because that's one of the issues that you have is you start looking for these files and nobody
Couldn't find
knows
them.
where they are because
Couldn't find them
paper
because it was
isn't
before computers.
right.
Mhm.
Everything is handwritten. It's, on paper. Paper doesn't last forever. Things get spilled on it. If it's in pencil, you can't read it because it's smudged or ink gets smudged. They rip and tear. And so you can't, it's not as easy to maintain those files. So the fact that he has that is pretty impressive.
That and
Had
what
that, and even hard to remember it.
yeah. The one thing that always got me about these old files that, the deputies, whoever, the investigator at the time, like, had this file, it wasn't that they had a copy of the file, they had the file,
They
right?
had the file.
And that always floored me. I was like, "How can they have the original file and, like, it's not, like, a copy of it somewhere in the police
Yeah.
department or something?" Like, that
Yeah.
just, like
So we as Southern police officers, and I'm gonna throw it out there because I don't care what people think now. I have challenged them day in day out, but we are very territorial about our cases. We don't want nobody to
yeah,
have it. We don't want nobody to have
yeah,
our notes. We don't want anybody to solve our case that we've got our blood and sweat in, that we've dealt with for many years, that has been close to our heart for over and over. And I'm telling
yeah.
you that we are so territorial, and we don't want nobody else looking at our file. And so if
I
there's
don't think
one
that's
turned in
isolated.
there, it's counterproductive. It is for us to be that way. And and hopefully we get better with that over time, and we have,
Well,
at
hey, the
least I,
first step is recognition, right?
Yeah.
that's right.
Admitting there's a problem.
Admitting you have a problem, yeah. And is
And
there a
the
12-step
people that
program for
see
that?
this, the older detectives will see this thing, they go, yeah, he knows what he's talking about. Because I'm telling you, I've dealt with that time.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something
Yeah,
scary.
it's not isolated to the South, I'm telling you, it's not.
It's not. It's not. But it was his favorite thing here. But let me tell you something else that's scary. Do you have any idea where our evidence locker was?
In the
You
trunk of
fix
your
it
car.
in the trunk of your car. No shit. I'm telling you, you were right on the.
Kidding.
No, that's it. That is it.
Wow.
We kept evidence in the car because we didn't have an evidence locker. We did not learn that. This is how I know in the 70s,
Mhm.
we did not learn. We did hands on, and in our trunk to us was secure from anybody else, and it
Yeah.
probably was for the main part. But when you've got
Right.
multiple
And
different
custody.
evidences in there, good lord! I mean, when you talking about the transfer and stuff like that, that could happen.
Yeah, secondary
Wow.
transfer and cross-contamination and
All that, and just because you took that evidence out, don't mean you didn't have some of that cross transfer left in your trunk. And so, but
yeah.
that's the way
Mhm.
it was done until we got experts down here
Mhm.
in the late 70s, early 80s that really said, "Hey guys, you 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 have to have the evidence." Defense attorneys started challenges on it, and
Yeah.
that's when we learned, and that's the sad part. California, I don't care what anybody says about California, they have evidence in a warehouse that they've had since the 50s. They did it
Yeah.
right, and and there's a guy
They
there.
had
I
a
can't
lot of
remember
stuff
his
happen
name.
down there.
There was a guy down there that started what is considered the NCIC now, where and I can't remember Saint something John St. John. I think that's his name. John St.
I think you're
John
right.
is the guy that really put all that together and says, guys, we got to put our evidence in the warehouse. We got to secure it, and we need to know who's criminals because we know they travel from place to place, city to city. We need to know that there's a criminal here that he also lived over there because he probably did the same crime, not just with homicides, but a rapist will travel around outside where he lives. And this guy is the start of that. And you can see that when I went to California and testified against Sam Little and found out they still had evidence from the 50s, I'm going like, man, that is cool. That is
Yeah.
something else because
Mhm.
here doesn't exist. There's nothing
No.
of evidence in the 50s. We have murders in the 52, but I couldn't find a file on that anywhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And we know from talking to different agencies that there are cases here that it's like, look, that where that went,
Yeah.
no idea. And then especially
And the
whenever so you
older
get into it
cases.
yeah. When you get into cases too, like Deborah's, where it is, multi-jurisdictional, right? You've got different agencies that are
Mhm.
involved in it. Now there's and maybe there's not as much communication going back and forth, but it's also not as easy to share information. You can't just email something over, right? You gotta phone that in or drive it over there. Um, like, I imagine that was really hard to keep up with. And, we've talked to a couple of investigators that pulled files that had, 2 or 3 agencies that were working on 'em. They were like, "This file when I got it was awful."
mhm.
Because there were so many pieces scattered around here and there that wasn't kept like it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
It was a mess trying to go in and collect it from all these little places
Trying to
that,
recreate the whole thing, yeah.
yeah. So when you were looking through the file, do you think that the people that were committing the robberies are the ones that abducted her?
I
That
damn
committed
sure
the
did.
robberies?
I damn sure did. I looked at that and looked at that. And what are the chances that 3 little general stores will be robbed
Mhm.
in the same night, 2 prior to her being kidnapped? It just
Mhm.
seemed this is it. And, when you rob a store, if you think about the bad guy, a bad guy robs a store. Normally he goes in hiding shortly thereafter because everybody's looking for somebody that robbed a store. And they have a description. The clerk, she's left alive, has a description. And so when you go rob another store, it means you probably didn't get enough money for whatever you needed to get to wherever you're going.
Right.
If you're not from here and you're trying to get to where you live, Washington
Right.
County, then you
Right.
go, crap, I only got $10 from this store. We know it was more than that, but I got $10 from this store. Then go to the very next store after one is being robbed and rob again. That was something we had not experienced before. Normally, you rob a store, they're on foot, they leave, you can't find them, and nothing
Right.
happens for days after that. And here you got 2 robberies after that, and then she's kidnapped from there. So, is that still a viable thing? Absolutely. It could have been 2 killers that were traveling around that have never been identified as being killers. But just think about this: serial killers get away with the majority of their crime for most of their career. They're only caught at the end of it. That's how we know they killed 40 or 50 because they confessed. How many have we not caught? How many
Mm.
are out there?
Yeah.
There's no way we caught all of them. So
Yeah.
if the majority of the ones we caught have been doing it for years, there are more that we had never caught. And so this could be 2 that we never caught. They may be connected to another crime somewhere else. If DNA was preserved, and it ain't going to be anywhere around here preserved, if they did it in California, it's still preserved. But if they
Right.
did it anywhere along the coast, we just were terrible about collecting that and preserving it
Yeah.
over time.
Would you
So
say if they were the ones that were the killers, which came first, the chicken and egg, do you think that they were bank robbers who decided to start killing, or not bank robbers, but robbers that decided to start killing, or was killing the primary and it just happened to give them some way, a means
They
to
needed
do so?
funding,
Yeah,
if
or
there's
funding, or
2,
just an opportunity to be, oh, they think this is the thrill and this is who they're going to kidnap, and they might as well take a few bucks out of the machine, in the
I think
meantime.
money. I think money is going to be the majority of that because they robbed the stores of 2 other women. And I don't know what
Yeah,
these
but
2
not
other
very
women.
much money. That's why I wonder.
That's
Yeah.
right. And so if it is for a sexual reason, which it very well could have been, they go in
Mhm.
there and maybe, and I'll just put it out that maybe she's ugly as crap. And they go, not this one, or she's too big.
Yeah.
They have a preference. It's just like pedophiles have a preference and an
Yeah.
age. And
Yeah.
so a rapist has a thing. And when you see a rapist, they're either all blonde, and there are opportunities that present themselves that they can't find a blonde, so they go with a brunette or black-headed or whatever. So it could very well be that these people, whoever they robbed, clerks, were just not sexually appealing to them until they got to Deborah, who looked like a little girl. She was short, young looking,
Just tiny.
Yeah.
completely different. And
Yeah.
all you need is the robbery is going to set the the emotion already there. They're stimulated already from the robbery. They're hyped up, and then they see somebody that sexually motivates them in the same way. Then I could see that combination being, okay, we're taking this one, and that could have very well have what happened in reference to this case. And we'll never know for sure, unless something breaks. Somebody hears
Yeah.
this story, goes, "Oh, I know the hell you're talking about," and
So,
that's why I do this.
and one of the early theories was that they had robbed Deborah's store first and then used her as a hostage to prevent, being stopped during these other ones. But that would have been backtracking, right? Like the other stores would have been backtracking and then having to come back towards Washington
Yeah,
County.
for her. So we know
Mhm.
that she was. I think we're pretty confident that she was taken after a period of time because there was somebody that drove down. I can't remember the guy's name. And I will tell you, Sam Little is even a suspect in this one because a car that he drove was seen there, and there were 2 black guys. They were supposed to be suspects in this as well, driving around in a Cadillac in reference to that. And now that Sam Little came to light, when I started digging all these cases up, Sam Little's driving around in a Cadillac, and so Sam Little doesn't admit to this, and Sam Little, there's a lot of things Sam Little didn't admit to. Did he do that? He had to get money to go from point A to point B. And if he
Right.
didn't do the shoplifting, or he couldn't get Dorsey out of jail to do his shoplifting for him, he had to get funds other means, and he had to rob stores. I know he's a robber. That's how he got in
Hmm.
prison. That's where he met Orilla Dorsey at, in reference to the prison from robbing a campground. So he's robbing places like that. At 2 o'clock in the morning, there ain't anything else open but a store, and if you need money, that's where you're gonna go. Sam was
Yeah.
traveling across the states, and yes, he could have very well been. He was in the area in 1978, 77. He was here.
Mhm.
Um, He was in my
Any
city. He
other
killed one in my city. I'm sorry.
Yeah, had you know if he's ever done anything similar to that aside from this particular
So he
time frame?
robbed a campground years ago, and or that's where he met Arilla at. Is basically the prison had the females on the top. It's an old wooden courthouse prison, and the females were on the top, and the males were on the bottom. And there was a hole in the floor that the females could look at the men down there, and the men would be looking up at them. And there was all kinds of sexual gratification going on with the females looking down through the hole. And she liked Sam Little. And so she came to her Sunday to go meeting, with her Sunday go meeting clothes, and testified for Sam Little on the robbery that she was with him then, and got him completely exonerated from the robbery there. He then robs a man in Miami and shoots that guy and is acquitted in that case as well. So yeah, Sam Little, there's no way you can't tell me that Sam Little, when he spends months and months and months in jail like he did in Leon County, Florida, months in
Mhm.
jail, gets out, how does he have enough money to get his car out of hock
Right.
and he's in a
Yeah,
record yard when they don't have any money? So
yeah.
he has to get it from somewhere. He's either got to rob, steal, or do something to get enough money to go get his car out of hock and then travel across the nation.
Right.
And you don't do that with just stealing, $5 pair of panties and go sell them for $2.50. There's just
Yeah.
no way.
Mhm.
You have to get your money from other places. So he's a robber. He's a burglar. He broke in houses. That's his history. He's a rapist and he's a strangler. And then he found his niche in all these crimes he committed, found his niche with the prostitutes that nobody gave a shit about, basically.
Mhm.
And that's how
Yeah.
he got away with so many years.
Yeah.
So could he have been Debra Gunter? Yeah, absolutely. He was here. He was during this area. He was coming through this area. Now in Georgia, he was in 78. And the time frame doesn't really fit that he could have been in Gautier and got her then. But again, the
Mhm.
records are very slim on some of that. And could he have been out? Yeah, he sure could have.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that's the most likely scenario?
No, I think this is a white boy crime. It's not his. It could be his thing. I just don't, I don't know. I can't get him out of my head on that altogether, but the thing in
Mhm.
Georgia, I think could eliminate him as being down here at that particular time
Yeah.
when she was taken. So
Yeah.
it's hard for me, but after the Georgia incident, he's in jail. When he leaves there, he's in California. So he came through here.
Yeah.
Whether or not it that particular day or not, I just don't think it was.
So there's still that possibility there that you can't completely rule it out.
That's right. That's the possibility. And there's so much that Sam didn't tell us. I'm just telling you.
Yeah. Well, and there's always that part where they're like, they hold information back, right? Hear about it and read about it. Like serial killers will tell you, the majority of maybe where they left bodies.
They'll tell you what they want you to know.
Right.
They
But
won't
then
tell
they're
you
going to
everything.
hold some. Yeah.
The stabbing throws it off. I've never known Sam to stab, but he has shot, and he has ligature strangled. He claims
Yeah.
to the FBI he didn't do ligature strangle like that manual strangulation because they could swallow. But his first Pam, one of his victims that survived in 73 or 4, was ligature strangling with a electrical cord, and
Mhm.
she survived. And that's how he got caught on that. She came to court high on heroin and couldn't testify against him, and they had to do a plea deal, and he pled to 4, got out in 2.
So
And
it's a
that was
credibility
Sam
issue.
Little's story throughout his career.
Well,
But
they
yeah,
don't. One of the things that people always, one of the first questions that people always ask is, well, what about the husband? And
Mhm.
that's
yeah,
something that we don't have a lot of information on. When we go back and forth through the newspaper articles and it varies on who identified her body. And one thing it's her husband and her father-in-law, and another is her husband and her father. And, it goes back and forth. They don't talk about him very often. And then within like 4 years, I think
Was
it
it
had
less
to
than that?
Yeah,
I
probably
can't
less than
remember.
that. He's remarried. And but he never, like, he never speaks out about, I wanna know where's my wife or anything like that. And to me, that always stands out whenever a spouse isn't, and I know people handle things differently and they react differently, but it always stands out to me whenever, they're not asking. But at the same time, the papers weren't exactly calling her family and stuff either, asking for comments. They were getting it from the authorities, and that's what they were using. But where do you kinda stand on him?
Okay, so here's what I have to have in reference to this kind of case. I believe strange abduction. Could it be the husband? Yes, but I have to look at a couple of different things with the husband and her and Deborah. Did they have what I call disconnect? And so you can be so in love with your spouse, and when something happens, that is writing on the wall. They are distraught. They are besides themselves. They are struggling day in and day out, and you can read that like a book. You can also read like a book if they have disconnect, what I call disconnect. And disconnect is a husband and wife that every time they see each other, they're flipping each other off. They go, why are you still in my life? I wish you would
Right,
die. And you have that disconnect where there's no emotion there anymore. They're just living in time because that's convenient for them. They have bills together that they wish they didn't have together, and so that happens with a lot of couples. Is there's disconnect there, and so I would need to know at this day and age, if I was interviewing them, this crime happened, I would need to know disconnect, and you can see it right off the bat. Does that make them a suspect? Absolutely, it does, because disconnect leads to I can't divorce her. I'm going to give her half my retirement if I do that. I've got to get rid of her, and you can see that.
right.
You'll also see what they're planning up to do, how they're especially now with the internet, what they're
Search
searching
history, yeah.
and search history and all that. And it goes beyond that. What their friends said, everything else,
Mhm.
what the victim's friends say, and some of them may hate him, and they're going to give you a bad rap on him anyway. So, in
Right.
reference to him, what I found unique about that case is she went off with Carrie Bishop
Mhm.
while they were at the store. She was supposed to go to work. This has all the makings of an affair. She was
Right,
supposed to be at work, but when she gets there, somebody else is already there. So Carrie Bishop just happens to be there, her friend. And so she rides around with him, drinks a couple of beers. And then the husband calls, Gunner calls and says, "Is my wife there?" No, she left. She left with the bishop. And then so you look at that, that's just kind of odd. And his
right,
statement in it was he was okay with that. And maybe he was. If he had disconnect, he probably was okay with it. But
right.
if
Yeah,
disconnect, that would be since he lied to her and he didn't know that, that has affair all over it.
right.
Actually, if that actually happened or not, I don't know. He didn't seem to be bothered by it based on the
Yeah.
interviews. They looked
Mhm.
at him, and whether or not he could have done it or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
The other strange thing about that is that Deborah and her husband had just come back from Warner Brothers, Georgia, where they were told that a lady from the store had just been kidnapped and killed in Warner, Georgia, and that's why her mother wanted her to get out of there. And then lo and behold, she comes back and is killed the same very way that the other lady was in Warner, Georgia. That combined with the husband having disconnect, maybe
Right.
always was
Mhm.
something to look at, whether or not it's actually
So,
true.
almost like a copycat type thing, like, you were just there, learned about this thing, and then
Yeah.
now and it was something when you go back through and you're reading the newspapers around this time, this was not just a one-off thing. I mean, you had was it Rodriguez?
Robin
I can
Rodriguez,
Yeah,
Robin
1976.
Robin.
Rodriguez, that she that happened before Deborah, right? And that was in Pascagoula. She
It
worked
was.
at a little general store, I
It was
think,
wasn't in Pascagoula, it was in Biloxi.
Biloxi.
Yeah.
And then you get a little later and you've got
But Clara Turks? Clara
no,
Turks?
it's the one that's in, Talladega. O'Keever?
Oh,
I
You
know
had more than
I've
that.
got
You had Clemens in Florida. You had one in Tennessee that the guy and
yeah,
then he
there
brought her.
because one of the one in Florida that was, the boat guy, the boat motor guy, Evan
that's
Root,
right,
it was
yeah.
his granddaughter. She was an assistant manager at one of the little general stores, and she was abducted and murdered. That came up in it, and then, Sandra Kiefover is the one that was in '79 where the guy came in and abducted her from the Magic Market, and so you see those that are happening then. So this was something that was somewhat common at the time. Um, so it seems like if you're talking about, there's a potential for this disconnect there, it seems like, well, that would be a good cover story that, it's happened in other places. I mean, maybe that's not such
It
a bad
would.
idea.
So when I looked at the husband, they just came back from Warner, Georgia, reference to or Warner Robins, Georgia, in reference to and her mom saying that a clerk up there had been kidnapped and raped and killed. So when I'm looking at that, did that put the idea in Donald's mind or not? I don't know if it did or didn't, but it's certainly pliable to think that as an investigator and go, huh, that just happened up there and she comes here and it happens to her. What are the odds of that? But then when you look at all that was going around just here locally, the Robin Rodriguez case, and all that, and I'm trying to think of the other one. It was in Memphis, Tennessee. It was in Tennessee. She was kidnapped from the store, little general store up there. She was brought all the way down to Van Cleve and
Holy crap.
raped and killed and dumped there. We found her bones in 1979. We solved it in 1980, and that guy's still in jail now. Now, when I look at his history, he is from Biloxi. He married a female in Biloxi, and so which fit the Robin Rodriguez case. So there were so many people that, and I'll think as I'm telling the story, I'll think of his name. He's still in prison for the murder of that girl in Tennessee. But it was one of the skeletal remains that we were able to identify. We had identified her years ago, actually.
Mhm.
But there were two people involved in that one, and the second guy is the one that told on and gave evidence of who actually killed her. They both
Yeah.
raped, and the other guy got 12 years, and this guy got life. And but then you got a guy by the name of Rancourt and Covert that were here in Pascagoula. They go to Florida, and Covert is a suspect in kidnapping a lady out of a store there and killing her. And some of the the bindings that the wire that was used in that case there, they found in his camp. He was a homeless guy. He was in the Navy here in Pascagoula. They went to Logan, Florida, I think it was, or somewhere over there. There's so many of these things in my head. Some of them run together.
Yeah.
He was a suspect in 79 case, 80 case in Florida because of that. He was never convicted or anything, but his name was William Theodore Covert. I think you probably Google him and get that story. That was just some of the other suspects in trying to get Debra Gunter's case solved. As I said before, is when you're a cold case detective, they don't have all the suspects that I do. Because now in 2010, 2012, 2013, when I'm pulling all these suspects that have been arrested for crimes since the 70s, then I've got a pool of suspects they didn't have back then when Deborah was killed. And
Right.
so, and I can put them now in the suspect file and go through and see everything they've done. There were more than you could shake a stick at when it came to these little junior stores, Magic Markets, little juniors, and convenience stores. That was the place people were getting their victims. And it was all over. It wasn't just here, it was everywhere.
Next time on Unforgotten, we'll wrap up our conversation with Lieutenant Versiga before turning back to the research and digging deeper into Debra's case. And for our Patreon subscribers, make sure to check out the page. We recently uploaded the autopsy we received for Debra, and we'd love to hear what stands out to you.
If you have any information regarding the abduction and murder of Debra Gunter, please contact the Jackson County Sheriff's Office by phone at 228-769-3063 or through their mobile app. You may also submit an anonymous tip through Mississippi Coast Crime Stoppers via telephone at 877-787-5898 or through their website, which is linked in the episode description.
Since Alabama Cold Case Advocacy's creation, we have dedicated innumerable hours to researching and networking in an effort to provide the largest platform we can to the cases we share. We shoulder all associated expenses with Alabama Cold Case Advocacy out of our own pocket, including the subscription fees for researching and production of the Unforgotten podcast to provide a cost-free avenue for the victims' families of those cases.
We hope you will join in our efforts to raise awareness of Alabama's missing and murdered and support these families who have been forced to carry the immeasurable loss of their loved ones and the fight for answers. If you appreciate our mission and you are inspired to make a donation, your extra support will enable the ACCA to continue our research, share the cold cases, and help those families know that they are also unforgotten.
Unforgotten is an Alabama Cold Case Advocacy podcast, recorded in conjunction with Riverside FM, hosted and distributed by Red Circle to your favorite podcast platforms. Content, research, artwork, and production are by Sellers and Stormy of Alabama Cold Case Advocacy. Credits for music, sound clips, special mentions, and research sources can be found in each episode's description. Your support helps us continue producing Unforgotten and further Alabama Cold Case's mission of advocacy and awareness. There are a few ways you can help us light the path. Make a one-time or monthly donation to Unforgotten through Red Circle, sign up for a one-time or recurring donation through the ACCA website, or subscribe to the Unforgotten Patreon channel for early access to ad-free episodes. You will find the links for all three in our episode descriptions. Another cost-free way to be of great help is to follow us on social media, but most importantly, whatever you do, tell everyone you know about these cases. Sharing their stories is one of the most effective ways to help find resolution for Alabama's cold cases. Be the spark. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember, justice may be delayed, but the victims and their families remain unforgotten.
That was good. You did good on that one.
Thanks.